G'day brewers, today we're going to talk about how to kettle sour your beer and more importantly, how to avoid making crucial mistakes that'll ruin your final product. Stay tuned. Brew day has arrived. We've got a grist of 3 kilos of wheat malt and 2 kilos of Pilsner malt for our goza, which will give us a lovely soft mouthfeel to the finished beer. We're going to mash in as normal, but then we're going to do a kettle sour method. We're going to use 1 sachet of this Mad Millie yogurt culture. If you want to, you could also use half a cup of some yogurt that's got some live culture in there. And I often do that sometimes. Sometimes if I've got time, the night before, I will make some yogurt with one of these starter cultures in some milk, and then you have a live active culture ready to go for brew day. We're going to add Himalayan rock salt because I really like the effect that this gives. I don't know why, but I really like it, and everyone seems to like it in the goza. We're going to use coriander as well, which is important for our goza flavour. Coriander has a high geraniol content, and when combined with the right yeast to create the right biotransformation, can bring a beautiful lemon flavour to the finished beer. All right, let's get brewing. So I've mashed pretty fine here, which I think is important for wheat malt. Wheat doesn't have any hull, so we're not worried about mashing too fine. But we do need to mash finer because the grain is smaller with wheat than with the grain malt. And you might have noticed I then adjusted my mill setting to mill the Pilsner malt, so that I could still retain some of the husks, and you can see some of them are still intact. But again, I'm not too worried because I'm going to add some rice hulls to my grain grist. This will compensate for the lack of husks in the wheat malt and will allow the mash to louder more effectively rather than getting stuck. Just checking the pH, we've got 5.9 almost, so we're going to add some lactic acid to drop that down and get it somewhere between that 5.6 to 5.2 to get the most out of our enzymes. Okay, 5.54, we can work with that. we're just going to test the pH to see where we're at. Ideally, I want to have this at around 4, a pH of 4. As you can see, we're much higher than that. So we'll add some lactic acid to bring this pH down and then test again. 5.25, so our pH is still way too high. I'm going to add another 5 mils of lactic acid, see what happens. Okay, we're sitting at a pH of about 4.4. I'm going to add another 5 mils of lactic acid to bring that down closer to a pH of 4. The reason we do this is so that the final beer doesn't lack so many head retention proteins, which seems to be eaten up by the bacteria in the kettle souring process. Alright, so I'm hoping that we're closer to 4.2, 4.1 now. Let's see, where are we at? 4.3. Okay, 4.3. Yep, that's fine, that's close enough. So we're going to let this ride with our yogurt culture bacteria and see where this is at in the morning. Now that we're happy with the pH of our wort and we've pitched our bacteria to sour our wort, we're going to place a lid on top and an airlock. All of this has been cleaned and sanitized so that we can minimize the chance of any other bacteria or yeast fermenting our wort in the next 24 to 48 hours while we hope to reach our desired pH of 3.5. And next morning we're at 4.15. Still got a long way to go. That's okay. We just don't want to miss it and overshoot. So check out this pellicle. That's the lactobacillus has been growing, and that's the end result. Let's check. Okay, so we've overshot there, and that's ended up at 3.2. We want it closer to 3.5. So what we're going to do, we'll have to add a bit more baking soda or calcium hydroxide to bring that back up to our target range of 3.5 to 3. So that addition of calcium hydroxide has brought us back to a pH of 3.5 or close enough. So let's hit the boil to kill off the microbes and continue the brewing process. So I've got that sample from the kettle sour, 3.5 pH. And it was at this point that I knew something had gone drastically wrong. Instead of the soft acidity I was used to, there was a bracing acidity with a vomit-like texture and maybe a plasticky artificial flavour to it. Anyway, let's go back, let's retrace our steps and see where I went wrong. Now this is where it all went wrong. Instead of adding my yogurt starter as I would normally do for my process, I was pushed for time, I wasn't organised the night before, and so I decided just to add the bacteria directly into the kettle. This meant that I didn't have a strong, live, active starter, and this has allowed other bugs which I don't want in there to take a foothold. Usually the lactobacillus culture that I would add to my wort would be so powerful that it would elbow these guys out of the way and we'd get quick souring in as little as 12 to 16 hours. But as you can see, in this case, it's taking us a lot longer to get that acidity going, which has allowed other undesirable bugs to come along and join the party. Now for me, this pellicle was the first sign that something had gone amiss because I'd never seen this before in my kettle sour fermentations. I thought that the bracing acidity I experienced when I tasted a sample was merely because I'd let it go too long and I'd let the pH drop too low. But after a little bit more time sitting with the sample, I realised that what had happened is I'd got some butyric acid into the beer. Butyric acid is a relatively common off flavor in beer, but especially in kettle sours, because butyric acid creates an unpleasant cheesy vomit or baby vomit off flavor in the beer caused by anaerobic bacterial infection, often from Clostridium bacteria during wort production or handling of adjunct sugars. It indicates a contaminated product, typically resulting from poor sanitation, and the flavour will increase over time in packaged beer. So then I popped over to the Milk the Funk wiki to learn some more, and I found that Clostridium is a gram-positive anaerobic genus bacteria found in wounds, plants, soil, and sometimes in spent grains. Now, I don't think my grains were the source of contamination because I had boiled for 10 minutes before then bringing the temperature down and doing my kettle sour. So I had done my due diligence. I should have killed off any Clostridium left in amongst those grains, but alas, here we are. I think if anything, there's been a little tiny bit of this bacteria on the glass lid or on my stopper when I put that into place, and that's how it's gotten into. Even though I cleaned the glass, even though I cleaned the stopper, even though I use sanitizer to be as clean as possible, it only takes one or two small cells to grow and proliferate and cause a problem. Now, these little Clostridium critters actually love a temperature, an ideal temperature where they think, oh, that's just right, that's very comfortable for me. I might go on and reproduce and pump lots of vomit flavour into Simon's beer. That temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, the exact temperature where we're trying to keep the wort for our kettle souring to give our lactobacillus a chance to do well. So you can see how if we've got a couple of cells of this Clostridium hanging around, how they might think, this is beautiful, I'm going to replicate and cause a big problem for your finished beer. So what can I do? How can I change my protocol to give me a better result, or at least a better chance at a good result at the end of the day? Well, first, I've already mentioned that I did a boil before the kettle sour process, which I think is important to boil off any undesirable bacteria before you get started so that you can go as pretty close as you can to a clean slate. Second, you'll recall that we pre-acidified the wort, and I explained that was so that it didn't eat up so many of those head retention proteins during the kettle sour process. But this pre-acidification also gives our lactobacillus a better chance at proliferating, a selective advantage, if you like, over other bacteria like Clostridium. Maybe I could have went a little bit lower, closer to that 4.0 mark, and maybe I will in future attempts. And third, and I think this is really where I dropped the ball, was I didn't make a yogurt starter the night before. I thought, I'll be right, I'll give it a go, I'll see how it'll pan out, and now I know that's not the way to go about it. The sachet of lactic acid bacteria that I added to the kettle was just too small and minute to compete with the Clostridium. So next time I'll go back to my best practice of making a yogurt culture starter the night before, and then pitching, say, 500 mils of that starter directly into my kettle. That way the lactobacillus can get going and drop the temperature, usually in 16 hours, before the Clostridium gets a chance to even get going. If you've enjoyed this video and you like sour beers, check out this video, which goes through a mixed fermentation sour process and the science behind it.